Do you crave adventure? Does your heart pound like a drum for savagery? Does your blood boil for a tale of vengeance? Well, you're in luck. Savage Realms Monthly presents Wild Revenger, written by Jack Myers, taken from the September 2023 issue of Savage Realms Monthly. You can find all our issues on Amazon. Do yourself a favor, pick up a copy. You won't regret it. And now, Wild Revenger, narrated by Matson. Wild Revenger by Jack Myers. A freezing gale howled through the tall green conifers, making their vaulting, frost-dusted peaks moan like a funeral dirge. Vonslar imagined that dirge was for her. They had killed her. 3 stinking dogs, without reason or justification. Winter's merciless grip enveloped the realm, and a burning desire for justice gripped his heart and squeezed until he thought the organ would burst. Fragrant ice-laden boughs leaned over him in a kind of benediction to his savage cause. Nothing would bring his dead wife back, but such an atrocity should have a price. So let that price be flesh and steel. Then Vonslar would die a happy man. The world, past his horse's bowed head, was a white wall. This lonely region, the Kranalita woodland, had a well-earned reputation for killing weather. Swinging one long leg over his horse's bent head, Vonslar slid off the soaked leather saddle and continued trudging through knee-deep sludge while leading his mount. It wouldn't be long before cold killed them both. A lucky punch had bent his nose, and the broken bone obscured his vision. Vonslar pulled his bearskin coat tight, and his hands chilled into clumsy mitts, gripping the cold, dark fur. Snow fell down the back of his cloak, sending shivers. "You didn't stop them." Vonslar repeatedly cursed himself, the words a wriggling worm in his tortured mind. Dandy, his horse, had finally given up. All 4 legs buckled. A moment later he was lying on his side, the torrent of snow covering him in an icy gray film. Vonslar spared no more than a glance back, because he knew it would break him to do more. "Sleep, old friend. I'll join you soon enough." It might have been minutes of walking, or an hour. He was losing his sense of time. Vonslar saw something ahead in a small clearing on the right, a place of piled-up logs and rocks. It was a shelter, created as a rest stop for weary travelers. A light dazzled his eyes, and there, in the middle of the road, she stood, Demetra, his murdered wife. Her naked skin glowed deep golden brown, with gold-dusted flecks shimmering over her entire body. Those lovely gold marks were a sign of her power. She stood proudly in the center of the road, and the storm didn't seem to trouble her. Vonslar realized this was a sorcerer's thing he'd never understand. He'd seen Demetra do impressive things, like the miraculous healing of babies, or vanquishing terrible maladies. Healing and helping others had been her way. War and strife had been his life until he met her. Vonslar took a knee and drank in her ethereal beauty. Looking at Demetra now, the snow passing through her, Vonslar realized she was an apparition. She faded briefly and coalesced into a vision again, rotating in the air with her arm outstretched. She continued to turn and pointed, looking over her shoulder at him. Storm winds whirled, and his vision blurred and cleared as he took faltering, kneeling steps toward her. Then Vonslar looked again, and his eyes followed her slender arm and delicate pointing finger, and there, among the logs, crouched 3 men, trying to make a fire in the middle of this relentless blizzard. He saw the bright sparks from a flint stone, and heard the sharp crack of rock on steel. Demetra hovered over him now, radiant and smiling. He marveled at the billowing mane of coal-black hair and sensuous curves, his vision caressing downward over her gorgeous form. He thirsted to touch his wife and feel her warm and alive again. But here were the damnable cowards who had taken her away from him. Fortune had finally turned its wheel in his favor. A gust blew across him, freezing his ears so that he winced in blinding pain. His vision rippled with a fever that gripped him from crown to heels, and he was ready to share that pain. As Demetra faded on the blowing wind, Vonslar rose to his feet. No fever would stop him now. Here sat the trio that had taken it all away. At last, one was bold, with a dragon tattoo on his face. Another was older, with long hair jutting out from a bearskin cap. The third was young and blonde. The blonde had used a rope around Demetra's neck, while his friends beat Vonslar senseless. Vonslar could still hear the garrot's wooden peg straining, while the rope twisted and cinched, turning without mercy, tightening inexorably around his beloved's neck. Dragon Tattoo struck his flint without luck, and didn't notice Vonslar's approach over the wind howling in the pines. Vonslar's hand went to his sword, but it wouldn't unsheath. The damn thing had frozen in place. By all the gods, I will eat your heart this night! Vonslar bellowed. The gale drowned out his words. He bent down and grabbed up a fist-sized stone from the edge of the fire pit and smashed it down with all his rage and might on the blonde. The blonde's head split open, and for a moment Vonslar thought he saw a light escape along with a freshet of dark blood. He blinked and shook his head, and the light vanished. If the killer had a spirit, he planned to set it free, so his sorceress beloved would capture it and cast it into eternal torment. Vonslar felt the bloodlust as he smashed the frozen stone down again, splitting the blonde's nose and shattering straight white teeth into a pulped red mass. He raised the rock a final blood-rage time. A heavy body slammed into him, knocking him out of the pit and over an embankment. He landed in a tangle of frozen briars. Von Slar kicked and yanked at the mass, cutting his hands and face. His sword finally came free of the old scabbard. It was a nicked and rusting thing, but still sharp enough to kill. By the time he struggled free of the briars, the three murderers were riding away. Dragon Tattoo had to help the blond man stay in his saddle. The horse kept colliding. The animals snorted and whickered. Von Slar listened to the distant hoofbeats and prayed he had spilled enough blood for a painful death. He grasped his scabbard, and it sent a pulse up his left side, like a lightning bolt, making him drop to his knees with a gasp. Without looking, only feeling, Von Slar found a dagger sticking out of his side. The cold steel was wedged between his ribs. His lust for battle had burned so brightly that he hadn't felt the wounding barb until he touched it. He carefully sheathed his sword and removed his belt. Then, with the utmost care, gripping the knife handle with both hands, Von Slar slid the steel out of his body. Seeing the long stiletto wet with his blood, Von Slar knew his death loomed. He'd seen lesser sword wounds kill in minutes. At last, he had hurt one of them. Mortally, he hoped. One of those bastards would clot and choke by the morning. Von Slar burned with fever, rage, and pain. Blood flowed beneath his clothes. He'd shed his bearskin cloak, then a shearling vest, and finally the bloody linen undershirt. Naked from the waist up, blood pouring from his side, Von Slar drew his sword and lifted it skyward. "My soul for theirs! I make this promise to whatever gods may hear me." A glow formed, hovering over the cold pit as the spirit of Demetra began to take shape, her dark hair flowing all around her on the frigid night wind. Or was it on the winds of the otherworldly place where she now lived? "Would you ride with me for eternity in the afterworld, my husband?" "I wish nothing more. Take me now." "It is not your time, lover. Cold steel has mortally cut the skein of your fate, and those killers have the ire of my master." If his fate had changed, did that mean Demetra's was as it should be? What cruel gods did such things to happy people? Demetra's naked spirit spread her arms. Her voice lifted above the storm in a singing wail, a piercing sound no gale would overcome. She spoke to the boundless night sky. "Goddess of the wild hunt, hell, and the legions of the night sky, I have never failed to serve you, and I embraced my fate when you cast it upon me. I call upon you now to heal my husband in the name of vengeance and retribution. Dark and foul, bloody deep. His heart is full of fury, burning with a fever to smite my killers. And let justice be served, I pray to you. Hail, leader of the hunt that roams the night skies." Pain gripped Von Slar as the blood froze upon his body. He trembled and his teeth chattered. Forcing his head up, he beheld Demetra floating before him. Her glow warmed him and gave off a light so intense it ignited cold logs in the fire pit. As the fires rose and the warmth burned his skin, she faded and was gone. Von Slar grabbed his ripped shirt and stuffed what he could into the hole in his body. His eyes rolled, his legs trembled, and he felt like he was losing consciousness. He didn't remember putting his clothes back on, but his warm bare skin was about his shoulders again, along with his cap. He did not know how long he'd been struggling through the snow. Minutes, hours. He felt hunger pains, and the old fearful knowledge that he had lost far too much blood. Around him, the rows and thickets of pines and heavy shrubs thinned, and the storm quieted. He found his way into a clearing. The clouds parted, and the world was bathed in a pale, blue-gray moonlight. Von Slar fell into the snow. He watched as the trees pulled farther away, and the open spaces spread wider to make room for his fate. He heard a woman singing, a high-pitched wailing, and a chorus of raging voices accompanying her. Her voice turned low and flowing, a lover's contralto that vaulted like a prayer flung across the sparkling dome of night. This lovely voice sang to him. They who serve and they who call to me, I will answer them. 1,000 thundering voices echoed across the sky. Hell! You have called she who dwells in the secret places of highest skies of night. Make your vow to me, and you shall be healed and whole under my shadow, almighty, until I call you to ride with me forever. Von Slar fumbled his right hand onto his sword hilt so that he might swear his vow, but the words stuck in his throat, and he hesitated before swearing the oath. Indeed, he wanted vengeance, but this oath condemned and bound his soul to a demon of hell until the sun burned no more and no star glittered in the firmament. A vision of the rope at Demetra's neck assailed him. He saw the leering eyes and the cold stares, and these visions steeled his resolve. He'd make this bargain 1,000 times. Hail to hell! My soul is yours. Upon sitting up, Von Slar looked around the clearing, stunned with awe, for all around him now seethed a host of 1,000 men, women, animals, and undead things that pulsated and boiled with eerie intensities. He beheld a ghost army of tattered warriors astride deathless beasts. Mighty lions served as mounts along with dragons. And he beheld dreadful, slimy creatures summoned from a sea of nightmares, swimming between night-blue clouds. At the front of it all, on her magnificent white war charger, sat Hell, the leader of the wild hunt. "Humble yourself before me," Hell called out. Von Slaw struggled to move. Everything hurt. Soon he was able to kneel and gasp for air. He struggled just to hold himself up. "Look upon me and behold, for a god stands before you," Hell said. Her voice echoed across the land like waves crashing in a storm. Von Slaw looked upon the goddess of the deathless hunt. She wore only a sword belt and a winged helm on a bone-white body. Her flowing long white hair danced on the breezes of the deepest time. Her swaying naked breasts showed signs of decay. The skies filled with horror, things riding on patrol. They were Hell's elite guard. In the distance, massive gray-ghosted giant men-at-arms locked across the horizon to protect the demon army's infinite flanks. Hell moved forward, kneeling and leaning over him, her swaying breasts pushed against him as she leaned close. He smelled the open grave and sweet decay. Through his bare skin and leathers, he could feel her glowing naked body radiating cold from the depths of death itself. Now her frozen hands rubbed his body, and he filled with an intense warmth. Sinew and muscle mended until the knife wound closed. A rushing wave coursed through his body, and Von Slaw felt hot blood sing in his veins. His heart formed a drumbeat song of savage retribution, and he surged with the conviction that he'd ride happily among these ethereal, dreaded army for eons to have his justice due. "Go," Hell said, a wicked smile upon her lips. "You are healed and your ill fate is averted. Your bond to me is eternal, and no mortal can break it. The revenge you seek will pay me double in sacrificial blood and souls. In all such dealings, the advantage is always mine." Von Slaw closed his eyes to shut out her terrible, glowing beauty, and a moment later found himself alone in the middle of a dreary, freezing clearing. Above him vaulted the purple-black night sky. He couldn't recall how long he sat there, 5 heartbeats or 5 hours. Touching his side gave no pain. The scratches on his face no longer burned. His broken nose no longer blocked his vision. He cast aside that part of him that might question these changes. Now was not a time for questions. Now was a time for blood and action. Upon standing, Von Slaw noticed hoofprints in the deep snow. He broke into an easy run, his legs pumping as he followed the horses. His restored body had stamina he'd not felt since his youth. The night played out before him, and thunderheads raced across the skies. Run hard, run fast, catch them, kill them. Von Slaw's chest heaved. His body throbbed and felt boundless. Soon he saw 2 gates pass, glowing in a beautiful splash of moonlight. A fork led to a steep mountain path, or angled off right and downward into the valley. His enemies would never trap themselves in a snow-bound valley, which would be impassable for months this time of year. Half a day's walk on the pass led to the hamlet of Kulkanetta. As he moved into the mountain pass proper, the road narrowed, and soon it was only wide enough for a single wagon. A knee-high stone wall lined the right side of the path, and with every step, Vonslar knew the drop beyond those piled stones increased. Rounding a jutting corner, he ran blindly into a fist, and he just managed to duck a follow-up strike with a stout saber. Sparks flashed against the granite cliff wall. Vonslar kicked and his boot sank deep into Dragon Tattoo's belly. The bastard gasped and fell. "You all die now!" Vonslar growled. The other 2 leapt to attack. The blonde wore a heavy bandage on his head. How he had survived such a beating. Vonslar wondered if they too had supernatural assistance. Drawing his sword, he lunged. His blade glanced along the shoulder and neck of the big black-haired man, missing anything vital. The other 2 fell back, scrambling on ice and snow. Blackhair swore an oath and swung a long-handled axe. Its blunt side smacked Vonslar on the knee. In counter, Vonslar hacked down on the man's wrist and took the hand off. A bloody howl filled the pass. Vonslar looked upon 3 sets of eyes gazing at him in terror. His moment of vengeance had arrived. Hefting the fallen axe in his left hand, Vonslar stepped toward the trio, corralling them toward the cliffside and the abyss beyond. "She was a witch! It is our sworn duty to kill all witches!" Dragon Man said. He moved backward until his legs pushed against the stone wall. "She had a name, Demetra, and she was my love and wife." "A witch all the same," Dragon Man said. "We saved you from damnation, you fool!" "Aye. Now your death and damnation are my duty." Vonslar took a step forward and heard a rumbling. It grew to a roar. Then, by all the gods, he could feel the pressure of freezing air sweeping down the cliffside. Darkness fell upon him. Vonslar heard wet snow piling up in wave upon punishing wave, and he was swept from his feet. He still held his weapon, but the air was squeezed from him under that churning wave of avalanche. "Get off," said Hell in his ear. "I command you, Vonslar, for there are 3 souls to reap." He lay in complete darkness, his body floating, and he did not know which way was up or down. As he breathed in, the air grew thick and precious. Vonslar moved sideways, clawing and digging furiously. He found the snow caving in, and soon he was free. Above him, the moon was falling away over the valley. With a desperate gasp, he pulled the fresh, cold night air into his lungs and, laying back a moment, marveled at his supernatural strength. Hell sailed high above the broken gray clouds as Demetra rode at her side. Behind them followed the seething host of her infernal army, an army he was destined to join. Seeing all those ragged, tortured men, Vonslav vowed he'd never join such wretched ranks. He'd ride as a king in the wild hunt, or find a way to deny hell his soul. Hoofbeats sounded far off, thudding the ice-hard ground. Whips cracked the night air. His enemies had survived, and the bastards were getting away again. Breaking into a run, he felt vital energy flowing into him and through him. High above, hell and the wild hunt sang a sweet song of revenge that echoed around him like a mountain zephyr. At the summit, Vonslav stopped. He saw the distant twinkling night watchfires of Kolkanetta set against a field of total blackness. Half an hour later, when he arrived at the town gates, Vonslav slowed to a walk, his hand resting on his sword hilt. The town gates were a single layer of well-ordered wooden poles, tied and buttressed with rock and mud. 2 flanking fire baskets burned at the gates. A single guard slept on a chair, swaddled in blankets. He snored and didn't wake at Vonslav's approach. Past the gate and a short walk into the tiny hamlet, Vonslav saw 3 horses standing at a tavern hitching post. Voices carried from within the place. Laughter, conversation, flagons clanking. Vonslav mounted the porch and kicked the door open. Every head turned. The room fell quiet, and many a hand moved toward a weapon. Dragon Tattoo and the man with the missing hand stood at the bar. Any man who loves his family better leave. Vonslav drew his sword and let it hang at his side. Witch hunters, stand apart and face me now. 2 men laughed, and another scoffed. A stout man with a fox fur cap chugged his beer and belched loudly. Good night, all. Home to the wife. He pivoted and ran for the tavern's back door. He wasn't alone in the rush to clear out. A handful of men were right behind him. Hold your ground, Dragon Man said. Any man who helps me kill this dog will earn a gold coin. Dragon Man pulled a black silken bag from a knot in his belt and held it up, shaking it so everyone could hear coins jingle. The bag had been part of Demetra's dowry. Those coins were going to be used to build a home. His body trembled, and fury fed an all-consuming fire. A short man with wild, smiling eyes, screwy, with too much drink, took 2 steps towards Vonslav. His hand reached for his dagger. Vonslav rammed his sword point into the man's face, splitting his head open like a rotten melon. Blood splashed the crowd. The dying man's gurgle filled the room. Several men gasped and retreated. Vonslav kicked the dying man into a knot of stunned patrons. That was enough to break them. Screams of terror went up. Men collided and trampled each other, running for the exits. Vonslav waited for the smart ones to clear out. Leave now, or die, you dogs! Every one of you! Vonslav said and laughed. Dragon Tattoo tried to flank him while drawing his dagger. He pointed the blade and spoke, We let you live because we thought you a man bewitched. But I see you are a warlock, in league with the devil. That mistake will be fixed now." Von Slar noticed the other man was moving toward him. Amid the panicked crowd of locals, he raised his sword and, turning, threw it with all his might. The blade buried itself in the man's thigh, shattering bone and muscle. Dragon Tattoo charged, but Von Slar was anticipating it. He knew how this man worked. He grabbed the wrist behind the questing dagger and stopped it cold with crushing force. Now he was face to face with the leader of the witch hunters. Dragon Tattoo's eyes filled with disbelief. Summoning every ounce of savagery he possessed, Von Slar rammed his left index finger into the man's eye socket and fished the bloody orb out with a triumphant war cry before flinging it at the bar. The last of the tavern patrons stampeded out the doors and windows. Dragon Tattoo fell upon the boards, kicking and twisting in agony, with his left palm pressed to his face. Von Slar turned to the other man, who sat on the floor, pawing helplessly at the sword in his leg. "I'll take that," Von Slar said. He grabbed a wooden chair and crashed it down upon the man's shoulder. Then he grabbed the sword handle and tore it free. Von Slar rammed the point into the witch hunter's black heart. He twisted the blade and stared into the man's dark eyes, marveling at his face, so full of surprise and pleading, his dry red lips trembling and begging for mercy. "Not so easy to kill a warrior, hey?" Von Slar jerked his blade free and gazed coolly at Dragon Tattoo. He was sitting up against the bar, still holding his eye socket, trying to catch his breath. "Do you have a name, witch hunter?" Von Slar said. "I am the anointed witch hunter, Count Dava Henlock." He held his dagger up in a feeble gesture. "Who sent you out to kill innocent women, Count Henlock?" "I am from the Henkel. Our God demands we cleanse the world of witchcraft and evil." "Where is your young, fair-haired friend, the dog who killed my wife?" "I'll die before I tell you." Count Henlock scrambled to his feet, his legs shaking, arms trembling. Von Slar gazed around the room. The few men remaining watched him with trembling fear. The barkeep cleared his throat. "If I tell you, will you spare the rest of us?" Von Slar nodded. "You have my word." The barkeep pointed to a door that led to a back room. "You are evil incarnate," Count Henlock said. "My God will protect me." "My God disagrees," Von Slar said. He charged, his blade flashed, and he lopped off the Count's knife-wielding hand. Deftly he sidestepped a desperation tackle and, with a single stroke, cut Henlock's head off. The lifeless body fell, and the head rolled across the grimy floor. Air hissed from the corpse's severed windpipe, spraying an ochre mist on Von Slar's muddy boots. When he turned to regard the tavern patrons, the last were piling out the back door. Von Slar looked to the barkeeper. He pointed to the bag of gold. Take what you need from the dowry to cover the damages. What damages? I don't mind a little cleanup, sir. The barkeeper's hands gripped the bar top like a shield. Barkeeper, I'm burning this dung heap down with their bodies in it. I suggest you take enough to build a new tavern. The lanky barkeeper vaulted the bar, landing with a thud. He crouched over the headless remains of Count Henlock. He counted a handful of coins, stood, tossed the dowry bag on the bar, and bowed. "Crossbow slayer, beware!" the barkeeper said before he headed for the door. Vonslar grabbed and lifted the headless body of Count Henlock, hugging the corpse close. He started duck-walking toward the back room. Balancing himself, Vonslar kicked the door and heard the sharp twang of the crossbow. The spiked bolt hit the corpse dead center. "You're the pig who strangled my wife." Vonslar let the body fall to the side with a heavy thud. Struggling in a panic, the young man tried to crank the crossbow and load it again. Vonslar strode over and pulled the weapon away, flinging it into a dark corner. "You have a name, young witch hunter." Trembling lips mumbled around a broken jaw. "Not important. Your soul has a meeting with a friend of mine." The youth tried to attack, and Vonslar drew his sword, slashing the man's leg. Then he grabbed a handful of blonde hair and dragged the man into the barroom. When they reached the center of the room, Vonslar punched the young man in his face to lay him out. Taking an oil lamp from the nearest table, he poured out its contents, soaking the killers from head to toe. There were 3 more lamps, and he added more oil to the floorboards and chairs. Holding a last lighted lamp, he headed for the door. Turning back, he regarded the carnage. "Now I can rest." He tossed the lamp at the blonde-haired witch hunter. It shattered. A bright orange conflagration made him step backward and out the door. He hadn't expected the flames to spread so quickly. Gurgled screams followed him out as the heat surged quickly, blossoming like a sun into a column of pure white fire that shot up through the first and second floor and formed a tower 100 feet in the air. Vonslar had to move back in the middle of the ice-laden street as holy fire consumed the bodies. As he watched the fire soar into the black night, he saw the townfolk gathering. Then the first flying rider appeared. It was Hell. Brazen, naked, her Valkyrie helmet flashing in the ethereal column of orange and blue firelight. On her heels came the host of the Wild Hunt. Their war cries thundered as they hovered over the highest rooftops. They surged in a twisting whirlpool that expanded until it filled the sky with otherworldly riders. Their wailing grew as they ranged wide in a cyclone of ghostly bodies. Vonslar saw flying revenants brandishing spears and swords and metal whips that cracked with lightning fire. Dread joy filled Vonslar's heart. He raised his arms to the hellish vision and cried out, "I have received justice, mighty goddess!" Hell peeled off from the multitudes, and his lover Demetra rode along with her. Vonslar watched the war maidens land before him. Kneeling in the snow, he laid his bloody sword out as an offering to them. Then he stood to pay his debt. "You have kept your word, Hell. I know I must pay. I have decided you are not done serving me here, Vamsla, mighty slayer. I command you to wander far, and by you my will be done." Vamsla bowed his head and trembled against the fearful thought that he must survive this night. His body sagged. He felt exhausted again. Thus the capricious gods toyed with men's hearts. When he looked up, only ashes and smoke remained where a mighty god-fire had been. And there, on a ghostly horse, the color of an abyss, awaited his Demetra. "I rest in peace now, avenged by your love," Demetra said. "What shall I do without you? And how long must I do it?" He stood again, his shoulders square and proud. "No living man can know the threads of his fate, but I swear yours will be full of glory, my love." Demetra spurred her glowing steed. She leaned off her saddle and held a supple arm out to him. Vamsla spread his arms, awaiting her last embrace. A freezing crypt wind hit him as she passed through him. Her ghostly mount jumped and flew upward, and Demetra vanished into the air and stars. "Never trust a god," he said, flinging his words to the night sky. The end.